small group, I think, that they thought. But in any event, yeah, so what we're going to do is, can you hear me on this? I think it's like life is trying to shut it off. Right? Yeah. No like casualties of all talk. So, what I'm going to do is some tasting bags. So as I talk about candy, you can taste them and see. So these are only, you may know some of them, maybe not what they do, but were available in the 1700s, some even earlier than that. So I'll tell you about it and you can try it. Okay? And I'll tell you a little bit about what I do, and we are. One to the right. So, I'm happy to be talking to you guys about the 1700s. And one of the reasons why I'm especially happy is there's so much stuff that isn't true, it's ridiculous. And so I get to tell you what I know. And because of the university, I was in candy, solely in candy, but I got pushed out of the conference. So I do other things as well, but it's just crazy. I'm a researcher, I'm a scholarly researcher. I don't work on it, but I am. I used to be an academic. And the way that I do research now has changed incredibly because of not really AI, but more the tools that are available. So you don't have to go get microphones. You don't have to. I have volumes of old publications that are like in dust right now. You can go online and I can find a lot. Newspapers.com. So you're researching. I'm researching right now from the original sources, being from telling you something about the Revolutionary War, which we talked about in the 1700s. I'm not going to other places that are recent. The books about it, many of the scholarly documents, tend to be telephone, which is why you always hear the same thing in everywhere you go. But going to the original, what they were saying at the time, say in the 1700s, it's all available. And using those other documents just as sort of a guidepost. So that's what I do. So I'll tell you very quickly. So I do own the only research-based historic candy company in the world. And I do research in the history of Jerusalem, so it's really hard to what we do. The 70s, it's everywhere, from the example of Bible, all the way through. Because more or less present time, I am more in the 1970s with an industry to play all the cultural artifacts, and that's what I love about culture. So that's what we do. I have a retail store in Marcus Way, and our main building is in right up the street at Walmart, and that's where we have our warehouse, and we have a market, all the rest. So we sell places all over the country, and everything we do is a story quantity. So the story is the main aspect that's so important. So we will be focusing in this talk on a lot of the Revolutionary War, because what happened during that time is the use of sugars and sweets kind of rose up and became really significant or really important and invisible. So we'll talk about it from the standpoint of some of the Revolutionary War, but we can talk about other things too. Is there anything that you guys were hoping to hear about that I sodas, by the way, they all started as a medicine. And the ingredient in these, you probably heard that the last time I taught, the ingredient in the candy that made it medicinal was the sugar as well as other things. And so the question is, you know, in sodas, so we can talk about sodas, because those were going to be in a different way. Those were the things that came out of the apothecaries because they were medicine. And even now, there's no distinction between many of the candies and medicines. Like if you have a penicillin throat, what you have, maybe a peppermint, right? Maybe you have a sour ball, which I never even understand. So there's no difference. The idea of candy as being bad for you is really, really new historically. So new that other than fringe groups were really against it. It wasn't until around the 1950s that people thought of candy as being bad. And that was in most people. And then where we are now, if we don't eat too much candy, don't eat kids of candy, it's all nonsense because you've got to watch for something. Watch for the kind bars, right? And the candy bars. When you get a gravy and you syrup, and that's it. The reason why we have a bad reputation with candy, and then I end up getting to the 1700s, is because when candy came around in its current form of the Industrial Revolution, people sold it. It was marketed to working class kids, so they could go in and use their penny or pocket and actually buy something. It gave working class kids access to the middle class. Whoa, I can buy something. I too can be a success. And wealthy would that. And these urchins are using, power, they can buy something, you can't have it, whatever. So that's the origin of this idea. Plus we're full of fun. As a culture, we value work, right? And not necessarily fun. We are today, some of that, that kind of thing. So that's who we are. So the 1700s, meanwhile, were an interesting time because it was the initial fusion of foods from abroad, foods from here, and foods from different places abroad. So we're talking about cinnamon, and we're talking about sugars that came from Africa, and we're talking about peanuts that started in Peru and went all the way to Asia and to Africa, and then started coming back to the 15th, 16th, 1700s. So it's really interesting. The stories that come out are pretty crazy, especially about revolutionaries and how they make money. So I want to start to talk about that, and I'm going to focus on one thing right now, which is chocolate. So I have to tell you, I'm tired because earlier this week I was in New York, and I do programs with History Channel. And so I have to do 4 episodes in one day. But I also researched 2 more episodes just as a favor because they always get it wrong. And so I give them the right information. and they're very gracious, and then they say to me, during a new season, and it's so much pressure that I always say yes. But, so I want to tell you a little bit about what we talked about. And I can't tell you what any of the episodes are to get them out, but they do have to do with the 1700s. So during the 1700s, the revolutionaries really were looking for anything that could help them with the war. And they were essentially, what do they call them? They were all revolutionaries, right? And so what they did is one of the main things that we never hear about is they resorted to piracy. And piracy is really significant to the, I'm going to start with differently actually, but it was really significant because number one, when okay, let me explain the part. You guys know about how piracy was doing the revolution in the 1700s. It was the letter of marque that the revolutionists gave to anybody with a piracy was always that kind of crazy raiding of ships by other ships, but in the Revolutionary War, it became a means of operation, right? A way for them to get things in. And from that, we have logs from the forts that tell us what it is that they were bringing in and what the revolutionaries were selling, if they had means, were eating, had been eating before, and all the rest. The exception to all of that is chocolate. And chocolate is, this is what I said on the History Channel, so you don't have to watch it. Chocolate is, the story of chocolate is the story of America. And the reason is because chocolate originated in Mesoamerica, right? And from there, it went to from Mesoamerica to Mexico. And where did it go from Mexico? Anybody? Spain. Not Spain, yeah, no. Thank you, that was the answer I wanted. Eventually it did go to Spain. No, it went to North America. The Native Americans in the Southwest, as we call it now, were eating chocolate. They were using it. Europeans hijacked our history, right? We're not going to do that. We're going to have that. So chocolate became a really significant tool for the revolutionaries for many reasons. One of which, during the Revolutionary War, they didn't have to depend on European imports for things they like tea. They replaced the tea with chocolate. Where was the chocolate manufactured? Boston, Massachusetts. So it could go up the coast, get to Boston, Baker's chocolate, right, 1700, and they could produce the chocolate. It wasn't great chocolate by modern standards, but that's what it was. So this is, what you have in this little bag here is the chocolate of the Revolution. The other thing to say is that people at home would use this chocolate. It was very difficult to make. You had to stir and stir and stir and stir. But bakers did have different levels of chocolate, and the really bad stuff, it was called the low grade, so that people without means could get it. And then there was the best stuff that people at home certainly wouldn't make if they didn't have a lot of money. They would either have workers or enslaved people, enslaved workers do it for them. So this is Conrad, and I guess, you know the story of chocolate, right? Yeah. After roast, you have bean, and then you have seeds, and then you have to roast it, ferment it, and then you can spit. So why don't you try? This is what everybody is saying is good for you. Okay? And see what you think. This is the original chocolate. And today, put it in health food. Yeah, so what they would do to make it, have you tried it? Don't like it? I actually grow chocolate trees at home, and I wanted to bring one up to show you something, but I can't go over it. But anyway, go ahead and try it. And so the palate of the past is somewhat different, but this is, would not have been powerful. You would have sweetened it. They may have used vanilla, and some biotic. But this would have been it. So, how many of you like this?
It wasn't bad.
You like it? This is when they say cookies, what you're talking about.
I've had it in the past.
Sorry?
I've had it in the past.
You have? Yeah. So in terms of the 1700s, then this would have been common. Everybody could get it. I'm not a very poor. You don't. You have poor taste buds.
The taste is very delicious.
Now you can eat anything. So have is the leaders of the revolution, like Jefferson, Washington, all those things. They wanted people to drink chocolate instead of using British tea. So the chocolate that we tried was actually a weapon to fight against the British economically. If they don't believe in tea, if tea doesn't support the British, you still have an alternative. Thomas Jefferson. So my research isn't really on leaders. I research all the people who lived at the time, who nobody does. They always focus on the food effect. But the lead Thomas Jefferson did say was he reckoned that cow chocolate would be the next food, the next drink to replace tea. It was good for health, it was for romance, it was in aphrodisiac, probably it was for it's all mine, so we don't like that. And so that's the cow. Any questions on chocolate right now and how they used it?
No, the Mesoamericans basically like the Aztecs made what was effectively a potion with it, if I'm correct.
A potion?
I know that's not the right term, but it's like a drink they made by mixing chili peppers, cocoa beans.
It was kind of the same as what the revolutionaries had. They would mix it up. They would add vanilla because that grew there. They would add chili peppers because that grew there. And they would drink it. It was considered variously an everyday food, breakfast, whatever, and it was considered a really significant food, a gift from the gods. So yeah, anybody else? Any thoughts, questions? Yes.
Was it grown here in North America, or did they import it in from like Mexico, Central America, and so forth?
Yeah, it was not grown in the colonies because it's too cold.
Okay.
Right, so it is a tropical tree. Now it's all over Africa. It doesn't belong in Africa, and it's not doing very well there. But so when the revolutionaries got it, or even before they would say bakers got it would have come from Florida and from parts of Mesoamerica that were close to the water by ship. Yeah, and they would catches. Anything else you want to talk about? Okay, then we can move on to some of the other foods. So when you think about candy, right, you think about the 1700s, you would expect the stuff to be pretty hard, right? And the reality is that there's a real variety of things that they were eating because they were getting their candy and their sweets made from Europe. And they would come over, and Europe had always been so far ahead, even so far ahead of the U.S., the budding U.S., that they actually did some remarkable things. So, what I want to do is we have to look through this bag and decide what area we'd like to talk about. And these will all be relevant to what they were eating in the 1700s. And we definitely have, from research but also from list of other things. Anybody want to start here? Don't be afraid. Right.
Tell us about this yellow piece.
Oh yes, yellow peas. All right, this actually didn't come over from Europe because it didn't have to, because they made it here. Yeah, so this is called stained glass candy, also known as hardtack candy. And what they would do, this is an interesting piece of candy because it was really egalitarian and doesn't make it. They would take a boiling pot of water, right, with sugar in it. What is boiling sugar? There was actually doing it over a fire, but they did that. And then they added whatever ingredients were medicinal. So, and by the way, they also added coloring. So we always think of the 1700s early on having coloring. One of the colors du jour was red, and they got that from arsenic. So they would put sort of desperate plans. It wasn't, but this is staying up, so they would boil it, and then what they would do is put it on sort of a tray in front of the fire, and they would pour the liquid into the tray, and then let it dry and harden. And when it did that, then they would smack it, right? Have you seen people do that? You know how that they would smack it, and they would use it, as I said, they would use it as a medicine. They would also use it as a sweet. So it kind of was right in the margin where it was both medicinal and it was fun, but it was never bad for you. None of these candies ever were bad for you until the maybe early, until the pure reaction. Yeah, they all have purpose. So what I don't know the flavor. It's either lemon or sassafras. My employees would order, right?
Sassafras.
Sassafras. So sassafras is really important. Also, particularly the Native American throughout North America, India. You know the sassafras tree, right? And it has some ingredients. So sassafras, I'm going to see if you can guess this one. It's a little maybe but sassafras was used by the Native Americans who used a whole bunch of roots and barks and everything to make this wonderful brew that they would drink. And it was called tea, root tea that they had, and the sassafras was in it. A guy, a European American, was Quaker, discovered this, and he turned it into his own tea. One thing led to another, and the Industrial Revolution came, and he wound up making this brand new soda that was selling really well, and got better, and everybody really loved it. And everybody really guess what that was coming from this? Sorry? It's root beer, and the guy's name was Charles Hires. And what happened was, during Prohibition, or you believe it, the temperance movement, the Quakers, the Friends community, are very angry with him because he was selling beer, right? He was coloring beer, but it wasn't really beer. It was really soda. So what he did, he couldn't stop selling it. It was really popular. He called it the official drink of the temperance movement. And it became what it is today. But it did start with this. They did use sassafras as a medicine and drink as well. So, and stay with us, kind of, this would have been used for sort of the stomach upsets or anything like that in what was in it. So, questions about our candy?
Did it actually have any effect as a medicine, or was it just kind of a comfortable type of thing?
Well, comfort is, I would say, medicine, but personally I go to cocktails and everything. But I will tell you, yeah, of course, that the medicinal value was definite and had been documented all through history. And benefits of sugar have been documented through history. So, yeah, it definitely was. And especially no more than in war. So the sugar and things like sassafras were in the Revolutionary War, World War I, and World War II. They carried them in the officers anyway, have them in little trunks, which are called traveling trunks, covered with deerskin. If you look for them, you'll find them because they went out of deerskin, went out of fashion, so they put them all aside. I had 4 of them from the Revolutionary War. I tell people, and they say, well, that's good. You know, no big deal. But they would have a compartment for sugar. They would have a compartment for, tea type of things. They would have a compartment for chocolate products, right? The soldiers didn't have any of that. That was the opposite. But, yeah, they didn't have that. Any other, if you have any question, I promise I'll go on and answer. So, anything else? Did you like this? Oh, with the sassafras, and then it all worked. Yeah.
But it's like perfect for every year we may have to take a lot.
Yeah. It is now eaten as a Christmas. It is an Appalachian Christmas tree because you can't make it unless we hire a man. Thank God to make it for us. We can make anything time of year. But in the summer, you can't make hard candies as well because it's too sticky. It's kind of like chocolate.
Oh, they could have it.
Well, the coating on the candy is so that it won't stick to the other candies. And then the sugar itself, not so much. So, all right, anything else about how candies are sugar? Or the revolutionaries and what they carry in their little trunks? Okay, bag. Who wants to get another candy out of that bag? I'd like to see. Oh my God, sorry. Yes, these are great. Now, let me see if I didn't have time. Good, okay. So these are really classic 1700s. You may have seen a little bit of this at the dragées for almonds, you know, and then the little seeds, recognize those. Indian restaurants, right? A little bit. All right. These are sugar plums. So you know when you hear about the sugar plum theory? These are the sugar plums. So what sugar plums were, and these were exceptionally important. They were little seeds or nuts that they would put into a pan, and that they, I should say, skilled craftsmen put into a pan, a balancing pan that went over the fire, and put these little nuts or seeds in sugar water or sugar syrup. And they would have to shake it and stir it constantly, or if they didn't, it would crystallize and it would be smooth and coated. They would then take it out of the sugar, put it by the fire, let it dry and harden, and then do it all again. And then with layer upon layer, sometimes taking more than one. They were used for after dinner. You would have them as an after dinner dish if you were really well to do. And it was supposed to be very breath freshener, and you would have things like fennel in it. It would be good for your stomach, for digestion, and all that kind of thing. Some of them had a little anise seed in the middle, and it was like a little ball shape, right, a little round thing. That was also another form of sugar plum. That was used for the same reason up until the late 1800s. And somebody figured out how to make a cement kind of machine, and they put the seed or nut into that, and it would spin it around, and be a little round, it would be a round ball about maybe. And now we're into the 1800s, and the name of this round ball, the kids always got and loved. They came out of the sugar plum. Jawbreaker. So this is the origin of the jawbreaker as well. The almond, just taking over the almond very quickly, because the almond is really important because it represented the 1700s and all the way pretty much through history. It represented new beginnings, amongst other things, but new beginnings, because it was the first trade flour in the Middle East and Mediterranean. That is why you see almonds at weddings, right? Nobody knows what that is. And for the very early 1700s, almonds were really significant. They were durable, they were healthy, you could put anything you wanted on it and eat. So this is one example of what they did have to do, but they also may have had cinnamon and sugar. You know, cinnamon and sugar you get at carnivals, those actually go back to the 1700s. Earlier. It became a name. They weren't from Jordan either. It just became a name of them that we use here. Yeah, and it's not But now we know why they have weddings, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, anything else?
My parents went to a wedding once where they threw these instead of clothes.
Right, so throwing the drawing almond, actually, I don't know for sure, if they were for it, I never heard of that in the 1700s. But that has been remarkably enough, it's been a tradition going all the way back to the Romans, where they would, and you know when you read history, that everything started with the Romans. It didn't start with the Romans, but they were the ones who knew how to write it down and keep records. So we always think it started as probably like lots of people did it, but they would take coated almonds, sugar-coated almonds, much like these, only not sweet, and they would throw them. And that was the, wishing you happy beginnings, and wishing you much joy, was to throw these. And your mother said you went to a wedding, will you tell them how that worked? I can't imagine. Yeah, they were shocked.
Not like rice.
Yeah. All right, anything else about these guys? Did you try the salmon? Yeah, good, right? And these are really, you're down there on it. All right, next, let's go on 5, 3. Okay. So, now, all the history, people have used petals to eat. And so, the candy petals were really quite illustrious and quite important. And they were one of the foods that I saw coming in on the ships into the port, mainly in Pennsylvania, but also in Boston and other places. And the rose was significant because it was meant to be very healthy, good for your breath. It was meant to make you amorous. And if you weren't amorous, it was meant to be somebody else who wanted to be amorous or whatever. So those were the roses. Rose gardens were really important as in general, rose, candy rose, and other uses of roses in a medical sense were really important too. These are not actually, again, from a place that opened in 1591. The reason I don't get them here is the way they would make these flower petals was to dip them in boiling water and sugar syrup and coat them that way. And the shelf life, they're really big to get them fresh. The shelf life is literally hours. And so you can't get them here locally made, local to the U.S. But in the day, again, they were probably made in 1700s or 80s. Enslaved laborers, women in the kitchen, enslaved women. They were generally not the ones who made these. They were very delicate, they were very well trained. And then, of course, some of them, the roses and the various iterations of candy, also came up with those. So what do you think about these? You're smiling. Like, well, the shop we carry, the only thing we carry a Bible in rose because they were the most common and were really hard to get. You name it, the Santa, lavender, obviously, right? I mean, there were just so many iterations. You really waste our flowers by not eating them, but also spraying them with pesticides and all that, so you don't loss. But anyway, these are, pretty good, I think. And you can use decoratively as well. So the Washington household, so we do set them up for, as I mentioned, the Washington household had an array of flowers, including roses, that they would use for this purpose. Would people who didn't have a lot of money have these? No. They really were for the well-to-do. They were very important.
So, would herbs ever be used to make any type of candies, like say thyme, oregano, something like that?
Yes. So they would have sugar thyme, not oregano that I've heard of, but they would sugar all sorts of herbs, absolutely. Yeah, very, very important. And the herbs were as important, of course, medicinally as other things. So, yeah. before you try it, I want to tell you a little bit. Are you guys hot? Is it hot when you
Would you
plug
like
it
to
off? Yeah. How
let
does
me know how many of the doors are being
Oh, no, don't worry, you're good. But it is just hot. I can tell you guys look like this is moonlight. Area here. I don't know if I'm fitting into that for you or not, but if it goes in and out, it's okay. Sugar. All right. So sugar was significant because of its medicinal value. It was also used as a fermenting agent, and it was also used as a fermenting agent, and it was a preservative. So sugar was used for all of that. The sugar of the time that people were using, it could have been cane sugar. It could have also been some of the imports, maybe sorghum, which came over with the slave ships, and the enslaved workers used sorghum, but it was really valuable, really good sugar. It did not crystallize, so now we have sorghum syrup, but it was around it, and the enslaved workers did use it. I want to tell you that the cane sugar is closely linked, as you know, with enslavement. So gradually, at the end of the 1700s into the 1800s, abolitionists boycotted because they didn't want to support the use of enslaved workers. They said they didn't want to defend anything with money, anything to use blood and sweat as slaves. What they used instead was sorry, I'm going on 68 years old, and every year my memory gets more and more strange, right? But they used that, and they used the beet sugar. And beet sugar was always important because it grows in cold climates. And during the lead into the Civil War, and of course the Civil War, those were the dominant sugars that we used. So this is cane. You want to give it a try, see what we have. What do you notice about the flavor of this? I'm surprised about it.
Not as sweet.
Sorry?
It's not as sweet. The sweet's not.
Not
as,
sweet.
yeah, it's not as sweet.
Yeah, it may be even for you, but we all share that same taste experience that you're having. Yeah, the sugar was not sweet. So cane sugar never has to be sweet. So when you get it, what you have is usually an infuser, especially made version of cane, but usually what you get, usually, is cane sugar mixed with wheat sugar. And for a long time, you were only getting wheat sugar. And what happened was women at home who were buyers of sugars and other things, they stopped buying wheat sugar in the 30s and 40s because they thought that it came from women. And they thought it was disgusting, so they wouldn't buy it. So what the sugar beet companies did is they changed the name of their beets to pure sugar. It was pure sugar. And then people started buying it. And in fact, so much so that the cane sugar industry couldn't keep up with it. So what the cane sugar industry did, this is in the 1900s now, they changed the name of their sugar to pure cane sugar, right? And then what happened was they all merged. The sugar companies kind of merged under the head of Cargill. You know, Cargill, they make corn syrup because it was such a difficult thing to do. Can't fight each other, we'll join forces. So when you eat sugar, you have no way of knowing on most of the labels. We sell wheat sugar at the shop, and it's wonderful. We sell crystallized, crystals, brown and white crystals, and it's so rich, wonderful. They actually use those to make beer now. But if you look at the label, you can't tell it. You know, the label doesn't tell us if we need to make sure it's with sugar. So it's arduous search to find out. None of the employees, nobody knows. They know, So what you probably are needing is going to be sugar. So, yeah. And as I said, the sugar itself, having other things that made it people love, the medicinal quality, but not the flavor. Anything else about sugar? Or diet less, so you guys can have a no? Right. In that case, you're going to run a kid. How many more to go? You were a kid. So, yeah, so this is orange peel. And what's important to remember about most of the plants that we have today, going back to forever, is that people use the leaves, they use the bark, they use the skin, they use the seeds, they use everything. So, for example, or orange, but I'm going to give you another example, raspberries. Okay, so raspberries, they have berries, but they use the leaves as tea, and they use whatever was available. For the orange would be a classic way of eating an orange, either dry peels in tea or as a candy, and as you see here with the sugar coating. So the sugar on this was used as a preservative as well as a food that tastes better. This was also in cake called, of course, sorry? Oh, well, it was an orange cake. Yeah, it was actually, but I'm thinking more of that Christmas cake. This is a fruit cake.
Uh-huh.
And the reason is, this style of candy goes all the way back to millennia, recorded, of course, by the Romans. I mean, you know what I mean by that. But anyway, we've got a couple thousand years. These are glacé fruits that we have. And because they were so durable and so healthful, they would have sugar coatings on everything. But I do want to tell you that even though we laugh at it, what's the cake called? Cake, thank you, is the oldest cake in history. So cake plus these just endured, still endured today. It's one of the biggest jokes in the food world, right? But and this is formidable and important. What do you think? Could you taste it?
Yeah.
Did you like it? You did? Not bad, not
Yeah.
bad, not bad. Oh, you guys like it? Bitterness doesn't bother you.
Mm.
Sorry? Didn't?
I didn't
You
make
did
it.
it? Okay, okay, good. None of you up. Now, let's start. Anything about the fruit? This is fruit. This is meat.
Those are dry candy like peels, right?
These are the peels that they would boil, yeah. Did you ever say anything? Any memories? Christmas memories?
Well, I know like lemon zest and orange zest is just the outer peel of
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yeah, keep away the bitterness.
Yes.
Yes.
The white part is the bitter part.
Yeah. All right, and these, by the way, are mainly just peel, right? It's not the white part. Awesome. All right, here we go. This is favorite. Yes. You guys recognize this? Huh?
Yeah, and this looks like they changed the line.
It is Turkish delight. They did have marshmallow, but at that time it was used for the marshmallow plant, which has a lot of mucilage in it, and so it was used for medicine. The marshmallow we know today came about in the mid-1800s, when in the mid-1800s we then had what was called instant gelatin, right? We call it some gelatin, or just gelatin, which made it possible for us to have a marshmallow today. So this is our best seller. And I'm curious about what you think of it. I mean, the Native Americans in South Dakota, Museum of the Bible, heard this one, you know, but just bestseller everywhere.
My favorite.
It is, yeah. I mean, we sell to over 200 museums, and every one of them is right? So I'll tell you the story of the Turkish Delight. The Turkish Delight is really great that they didn't have it during the Revolutionary period in the 1700s, and now I'm going to tell you how it got here. So, in fact, I just want you to know, I do shows for NPR, and it's only my voice that we're getting here. But we did a podcast on Turkish Delight, because I mean, 20 minutes, because it's so fascinating. But the Turkish Delight originated in the Arabic apothecaries around the 17th, around the 10th century, so the 900s. And it was sold as medicine for sore throat and stomach. Usual. The name of it was the Lokum or the Kum, or the Kumi, depending where you were, which means piece of throat. For that reason, they would have towering, they would just have like towers of Turkish Delight, and people would buy them on the street for that reason. So they were important. People kept eating them and eating them. And eventually they spread all around the world. And then during the Ottoman Empire, one of the Sultans, I forget which empire, the leader or whatever it is, but he loved it so much that he was said to have ordered just tons and tons of imprisonment wives, just as many wives. Regardless, it became known partly because of him, but partly because he betrayed us anyway. It became known all around the world, including in Boston. There in Boston, they have the Turkish Delight, what they call the Turkish paste or whatever. And it became a real favorite there. Again, eaten because it was good for you, but then they all were good. You know, eating chocolate bars, then we have a sick thing. But, so they wound up, Turkish Delight wound up in my hometown in Boston during the 1860s. So it had been there anyway, but it wound up becoming very popular. And somebody here took the Turkish Delight and pretty sure Shell, like Scrap, was his name. He was an illustrious idiot. Put a sugar shell on the Turkish Delight and sent it to the Union Sisters. They had that candy, and that was known as became known, decades later, but it became known as the
Jelly bean.
Sorry?
Jelly bean?
Jelly bean. We talked about it, right?
Yeah.
The jelly bean. And from the jelly bean, and jelly bean was the name of the guy who was really goofy, right? It was called the jelly bean. It was a jazz song called the Jelly Bean in the 20s. Scott Fitzgerald had a real, the horrible main character that he called the jelly bean. I mean, the story was called the jelly bean anyway. So people kept eating and eating it. The jelly bean was one of the family that or the Turkish Delight, I should say, that created for us in 1805 gumdrop. And then in the 1800s, the gummy candies. So the gummy candies were eaten in the 1800s, but they weren't as famous as they were later. Yeah, so it's the gummy candies. Then it wound up in Chronicles of Narnia, which is how most people know it today. Okay? It's not religious, it never was religious, it's not about Christmas, and it's not about Jesus. But if you want to think so, why not, right? I mean, Santa Claus wasn't even it, right? Or those candy canes, you know what the candy canes are used for? The tree. And striped, it looked better, but that's okay. We understand now. There's a creative, you like to do. So, anything else about jelly beans, about Turkish Delight, about trade route, about sugar, powdered sugar?
What type of
Thank you, yes.
what type of fruit is Turkish Delight?
It is,
We were, that's what I said.
oh no, yeah, it's almost over. Okay, good. guy who's from Turkey, and makes it for us. He's on the West Coast, though, so we get really fresh. We get it like just native. But he'll give us fruit, and we put it in a mixed flavor. And then they have used that. There's pomegranate, there's lemon, there's orange, there's intentional, there's orange, and there's so. Did you recognize it? Probably lemon. Yeah, probably his version. George Washington and Mount Vernon, they get the pomegranate because they loved pomegranates, so they had pomegranate trees there. But it depends on what, it depends on where you are. And really, people just like it. I find it a little overwhelming and so sweet. Yes? Good. And then I think that, all right, so as researching, this is before, it's like 15 years ago, so I took online research. But I did manage to find, but I found the Encyclopedia of Food, which they said was the only encyclopedia of food in the world. It probably was a publication made in 1811. And what they called this, I found this in it, and what they called this was old-fashioned. So in 1811, it was old-fashioned. So I can date this to the 1700s, at least, if not earlier. And it's a pretty, my task then was to find somebody who's making it. And I only found one place who made it, and they make it for me now. The Long Country Store sells it, as do we. So they tried to put a lot, I think that was a lot, because you just can only sell it to us if they wouldn't do it. So we still sell it to us too, right? They didn't want to really us to be able to sell it. It's a little world out there. But anyway, so what this is, you recognize what this is, the family. It was eaten after a meal, for sure. This is another version of the sugar plum. But this one is a little bit different, because what they did is they took filberts, right, which are bigger than the little things they had. They took filberts, and they had cream sugar instead of the hard sugar, and then they had this little crispy shell. These are called cream filberts, and that's the reason why. So they were really tough to them, but again, it wouldn't do very well to do it. I bet it's pretty tough. In the 1940s, so this kind of went away, and then they came back in the 1930s, 40s. Did any of you remember this? Like grandmothers, even the name of these were unforgettably mothballed. So they went from being the illustrious sugar plum to being the cream filber, sometimes illustrious, to becoming a mothball. And these were eaten for pleasure at things like rich cakes. And rich cakes, this is before candy was bad for you. They would put out candy bowls and they would have candy filber, which are really kind of a nice flush for rich cakes, little fingers, as well as other things. So that's what it is. These really are emblematic too, because it's really different. And so I guess one of the things that we want to let you know is that all the candies that we tried here, it doesn't mean they were all like that, because there was no standardization. See what I mean? So if you were making orange peels, you may be making it in a different way. You may be adding some kind of oil to it. And what's interesting is what we see is a kind of candy bar or a kind of cereal. None of them are the same. So this is the example of what some people make, or maybe most of the people make. Anyway, that's it. So other questions, even about this or any kind of candy at all? Boy, am I glad I'm not a college professor anymore.
What's the name of your store in Carpenter?
So the name of the store, we're online as well. It's just True Treats. TRUE you do have all these stories online, and as I said, I don't mean to be a lot, so if you look at various shows, or if you hear somebody, or you're citing somebody, you can very well do it. But I'll tell it to you if you give me a call about that. Oh, yeah, what's that? Oh, raw candy. Oh, yeah. Most beautiful category. Raw candy has been around for 2 millennia. It's crystallized rocks, but like the sugar, it was used for fermenting. It was used by pirates on the ship searching for that purpose. It was used as medicine, it was used for stomach and all of that. And then during Prohibition, it was all raw candy makers were shut down. But they didn't want people taking raw candy and making the most popular blue drink, which is rock and rye. And so they created that shut them all down. One company made, and that's where we get this today. And it changed in the 1900s instead of decorations, colorful decorations of cocktails. Yeah. Anything else? We're good? And that's what's it? Yeah. All right, well, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Does anybody want to, you guys